I'm gonna draw your mom.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
You've signed some strategic partnership with MVP. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, boxing's a crazy business and sport where to think that we would be forming a partnership with MVP would probably be a day that I wasn't sure would ever happen. But just recently, you know, I've kind of been looking and thinking about what they're doing in women's boxing, which I think is actually, you know, and I don't mind bigging them up now because we're, say, friends. But to be honest with you, when we did the AJ fight, that was kind of like, before that, we did Taylor Serrano 2. And it was like, we really fell out bad. I mean, you would have seen it on the Netflix thing. Then we did 3, and we actually worked a little bit better together. When we did Jake Paul against Joshua, they were really solid to us, and so were we, and we actually got on really well. And I've been looking at what they've been doing in women's boxing, which I think is quite incredible, to be honest with you, and the commitment they have towards it. And I've been starting to look at some of our bigger names and our champions and looking about how we can move them and how we can actually create a little bit of legacy and opportunities in the biggest fights for them. And I look at like Sky Nicholson, Elif Turhan, you know, Sandy Ryan, like some of our world champions. And basically I look at their roster, they've pretty much got everybody. And I can't guarantee that I can provide those fighters with opportunities to unify, become undisputed, make the most money they can in the sport if MVP have basically 90% of the roster of women's boxing. So Nikita came to me a while ago. He's like, what do you think about like allowing your fighters to fight on MVP or co-promoting them with us or whatever? And I was like, just from an ego perspective, it was like, and we've been talking over the last couple of months, and we basically agreed. Or I sort of reached out and said, I think we need to do it. So the partnership, the alliance, is basically going to see we stay in women's boxing and we continue to invest in women's boxing. There's no doubt about it.
That last bit there from Eddie was the reassurance that I was looking for. Even though MVP has cornered the market on top-shelf female fighters, Matchroom's commitment to the women remains the same, and they intend to promote them even further, this partnership. It was announced this morning. This is exactly what the women need. You will have noticed that women's boxing has lost some visibility as of late, and it's not because MVP did anything wrong in signing all of these female fighters. It's just that if you have to wait for one promoter, just one, to be the one to keep them active and keep them busy, you're not going to see them as much, as opposed to the way things were before, where all of these girls were spread apart, so that every time somebody's doing a card, there's a girl on there, and that increased the visibility of the women overall. If you've got girls on Matchroom fighting, girls on Queensbury, girls on Boxer, 1 or 2 on Top Rank, 1 or 2 on Golden Boy, every time you turn around, there's a women's boxing match that enhanced the profile of the sport the last decade, whereas MVP in bottlenecking all of the top talent, they didn't do anything wrong. But if most of the top shelf girls are housed under one promotion, you have to wait for that one promoter to be the one to do the show, to get them out there, to get them active. So what I'm hoping this partnership between MVP and Matchroom results in is not Matchroom's Valkyries migrating over to MVP. Not just that, but MVP's Valkyries migrating over to Matchroom. If they could sprinkle some of their girls on Matchroom shows in the UK, in the USA, if they can get their heads together, look at the schedules they've got coming up and what locations they're going to be operating in to decide what female fighters would service a card best, so that if you're doing a card in Australia, maybe MVP lets Ebony Bridges fight on a Matchroom show. If MVP is doing a show in the UK, maybe Matchroom lets Shannon Ryan fight on that show, so on and so forth, creating the best opportunities on a consistent basis to create a cohesive environment for the women where you're seeing them regularly, because it feels like the visibility of women's boxing has been scaled back. And it's not because anybody did anything wrong, it's just that if you're relying on one promoter to be the one that promotes all these girls, then you're just not going to see them as much. I don't know how many dates MVP's really getting on ESPN in the United States or on Sky Sports in the United Kingdom. They've got about 3 cards this month. 3! Bear in mind that I love what MVP has been able to do for these women so far and what they aspire to do for these women. But I've long been skeptical of the effectiveness for all-female cards, all-female shows, because some people aren't ready for that. It's not that I doubt their ability to entertain. I know just how entertaining they can be, but there are a lot of other people out there who might hear that a card is primarily comprised of women's boxing and decide not to watch it. What Matchroom did so effectively in the big women's boxing boom of the last decade was sprinkle the women in the men's cards. Couple of girl fights here and there. It exposed them to an audience that would not have otherwise watched them. And before you know it, you started seeing people saying, these girls are all right. That was a fun fight. That was a good watch. By not sectioning them off, they had spillover. It's what works the best for everyone. It's what I say all the time. A good fight is a good fight, whether it's 2 guys, 2 girls, or 2 squirrels.
It's all boxing.
Operating on that principle is more in keeping with why people tune into combat sports in the first place, whereas themed cards, you don't want to keep advertising it as women's boxing. Look at the women, oh, these women, because it starts to feel like you're preaching to people, and nobody wants to be sermonized to. When people tune into a fight, they just want to be entertained. They don't necessarily want to hear a political message. So the driving force can't be, we'll support the women because they're women. So what if they're women? That doesn't mean that people want to watch them. Look at the WNBA. For it to work and be effective, the driving force can't be support these women because they're women. The driving force has to be support these women because they're entertaining. The same as the men. Not simply because they're women, but because they can put on a show. And that's what you're here to see. You're here to see a show.
God damn it.
So I very much like the idea of MVP and Matchroom partnering up to sort of share their stable of Valkyries. What I'm hoping comes out of this is that some of MVP's girls end up fighting on Matchroom shows and vice versa. The goal has got to be to increase the visibility of these women wherever the opportunity presents itself. And it can't just be on MVP shows. I want to see that happen on more Matchroom shows also. Men's middleweight news. Tim Tszyu wants super fights after career-saving win over Spence. This wasn't a vintage performance, nor a particularly exciting one a la Paulo Acuzzo's knockout of the year contender on the undercard at light heavyweight. It didn't need to be, so long as the former WBO junior middleweight champion emerged victorious. After all, he admitted to waking up at 4 a.m. on fight day with his mind racing about the possibilities before a high-pressure headliner in his hometown. Having masked it well during fight week, a 4th defeat here would have been curtains for his career.
Tim's career.
He needed this win. Instead, Tszyu can enjoy his holiday in Thailand with his wife Alexandria, knowing options aplenty await him in a new division. WBA middleweight champion Erislandy Lara was named. Newly upgraded WBO champion Denzel Bentley, too, with No Limit chief George Rose. Excited about what's to come after some rest. Following 3 successful training camps, I was starving myself to get to 154. I feel a big difference at 160. Tszyu began at Sunday's post-fight press conference. Spence announced his retirement immediately afterwards in the ring before doubling down when quizzed by media backstage. Errol is a legend, but how I felt in front of him felt completely different than before. Felt like I could stop him at one stage. He was in survival mode half the time, running around. I've been dropped 3 or 4 times in the first round, so my thing is, I get too excited too quickly. Need to slow it down and take the fight slowly. Defense first, and then offense will go from that. The former unified welterweight champion threw more punches than Tszyu in each of the first 5 rounds, though the story was much different afterwards. Tszyu seized control in the second half, aided by success behind his right hand and left hooks. Spence absorbed his best work, though couldn't hurt the 31-year-old enough to keep him from pressing forward. That is normally Errol Spence Jr.'s sweet spot, letting punches go within close quarters mid-range to inside, though above 147, I had long been skeptical as to whether or not he could stay in character, because he had some size for a welterweight, but at 154 and 160,
Those are bigger kids up there. They're more durable.
You won't bully them so easily like you bullied Danny Garcia or your Denis Ugas, and I feel like that's what we saw this past Saturday. He couldn't hurt Tszyu enough to keep him from pressing forward. Inspired by Ronnie Shields' instructions, Spence emptied the gas tank with an inspired 11th round stanza, but had nothing left, and didn't connect on any of his 14 punch attempts in the final frame.
The work from Errol Spence Jr. was sloppy, inaccurate, labored. 3 years of inactivity definitely didn't help the situation.
Tim Tszyu landed the harder shots with a 117.59 edge in power punches over the final 7 rounds per CompuBox, while connecting the most of any Spence opponent. Tszyu even asked for Spence's advice on how he could improve. He said, "Stay patient. When you're not rushing in, you're very dangerous, and when you wait, you're a very good counterpuncher with fast hands," Tszyu said. Although he didn't get the stoppage that many expected, given how off-balance Spence looked for sustained periods, it was a welcome debut under trainer Jeff Fenech. His energy, corner advice, he's an unbelievable coach, Tszyu said. He's a big leader, takes charge, and I felt very comfortable with him. I thought it'd take a few fights to adapt, but even after 2 weeks, we started flowing, and I'm very blessed to team up with a legend like that. His energy, game plans, you've got to do this and that, just refreshing. He's an idol, not a pad holder. He looks at things afar, like esteemed rugby league coach Wayne Bennett. You definitely feel it, and from previous fights, it's a big change. You can fight on different stages around the world, but to come out to something like that atmosphere, Aussie boxing history, and legacy-defining type stuff is surreal. I definitely want to make some super fights happen.
He's targeting Erislandy Lara, which is a fight that can be made within the confines of the PBC. It's technically an in-house fight. Lara is not such a big draw in the United States that Tim Tszyu should have to come here to fight him. If Errol Spence Jr. was able to go out there to Australia, then Lara better pack his bags, because that's where the money for this fight is.
Errol Spence Jr. went out there to Australia. Keith Thurman did the same thing, and they're both more popular fighters than Erislandy Lara ever has been. So it's an opportunity for him just as much as it's an opportunity for Tim.
Since becoming WBA champion, nobody's really been kicking down Erislandy Lara's door with big cash offers. So he better get while the getting is good, especially now that he's in his early 40s.
And even in his early 40s, he still poses a grave and serious threat to Tim Tszyu, who I still view as being in a rebuilding phase. You just debuted with Jeff Fenech in your corner.
I have to be honest, I wasn't all that impressed with what I saw from Tim.
He's looked better. He looked better with his uncle in his corner. He even looked better with Pedro Diaz. Whereas with Jeff, I didn't like his feet.
Then how did he beat Errol?
I felt like he could have jabbed more when closing the distance.
But he beat Errol.
A lot of things beat Errol Spence Jr. before Tim Tszyu laid a glove on him. Second half of the fight, you see Errol Spence Jr. not being able to dominate the pocket the way that he used to at welter, get on his toes and move around, use the ring, and
For Errol, that was a survival tactic, whereas for Lara, that's a calling card, that's a signature, that's what he's used to.
more used to fighting at these weights than Errol Spence Jr. ever was. Erislandy Lara spent a good number of years as a junior middleweight champion. Now at middleweight, he's been there a while too, and he can fight a better version of the fight that Errol tried to fight in the second half. That closing the distance on Lara might prove more difficult than closing the distance on Spence.
He's durable. He's never been knocked out.
He's got power. A lot of pure boxers don't, because they're getting on their toes and moving around, not sitting on their punches. Where Lara generates decent power on the move.
Plenty experience.
The hope for Tim has got to be that the gradual decay of time would have caught up to Lara's legs enough that he can get to him, that his reflexes have slowed over time, his reaction time.
Skills and durability would have eroded enough that Tim can get to him and lift the WBA title from him.
It's conceivable that a fight like that could happen in the fall or winter months, presumably in Australia, putting Lara out a year from his last fight going into his next one, so he may have ring rust to shake off, all of which works in Tim Tszyu's favor, and the assignment is straightforward. Tim's got to be the one putting pressure on Lara and trying to outwork him. It's a winnable fight.
I wouldn't call it an easy one, but it's certainly easier than what else is out there.
As Tim Tszyu now integrates himself into the middleweight division, former unified champion Janibek tries to integrate himself into the super middleweight division, saying, "My fists are hungry, I miss the ring, I miss crushing my opponents with explosive knockouts, I miss hearing the crowd roar. I'm coming back soon, and I'll make it worth the wait."
Get a load of Genghis Khan over here.
Whenever a fighter decides to move up in weight, there are questions that lie ahead of them. Will their power carry? Will they be able to stay in character? In the case of Janibek, who already had a lot of size for a middleweight and was struggling to make the weight, I actually think he's going to do okay at 168. If Armando Resendiz and Jaime Munguia were able to win titles there, then surely Janibek can as well, because he's just as big, if not bigger than them. Remember that Jaime Munguia is a fighter who started out as low as 147. Armando, he was down there at 160, and they both went on to become champions at super middle. Janibek, if he plays his cards right, can do the same thing. There has been talk of Janibek landing a cushy spot in the WBO's rank standings on the premise that he did used to be WBO middleweight champion, now campaigning as a super middleweight. That would put him on a collision course with Hamza Shiraz, who fought this past weekend and didn't impress anybody. He, like Janibek, is a middleweight who moved up in weight.
Arguably lost to Carlos Adames.
If Janibek is still promoted by Top Rank, who's always had a way with the WBO, then it's conceivable that he could get that cushy spot via the WBO's rank standings and go after Hamza, what I think makes for the most winnable fight for him at 168. He's got so much more to choose from in the super middleweight division in terms of meaningful fights. And like I've been saying, I don't think they're going to be squirrely around him at 168. I don't think they're going to be scared.
Still serving out the duration of his suspension for that anti-doping violation. He's not set to return until the very end of the year. All of the time off will have allowed him to recuperate.
You know that boxers, they go into boxing matches with a lot of nagging injuries, wear and tear from repeated camps, where Janibek, he hasn't fought in a while, so if nothing else, the time off will have allowed him to recuperate, so he can come back fresh and at a new weight, not having to kill himself to get to 160.
168 will be a lot more forgiving.
A breath of fresh air. Moving up in weight for everyone is not an exact science. Some guys can stay in character, some guys can actually get better, some worse.
Janibek, I think, is going to be all right. I think for him, his power is going to carry, and he'll have more energy at 168, not leaving so much of himself in the gym to make 160. At 168, he might have more pop and more zip.
He was supposed to be the new era Gennady Golovkin, the answer to him, but it didn't quite happen that way at 160. Maybe at 168, he can live up to those expectations, because he'll have plenty of people to fight.
I'm actually looking forward to him coming back. The super middleweight division was already pretty deep. It's that much deeper if Janibek is going to be there now.